Uh-huh. I just feel like I've been around the block, ripping up fantasy stock, working around the clock. Look at the view from the top. Researching rookies a lot? No, I just be listening to pods. Yeah, one in particular, I'm just a messenger. Let me just pass on the rock. Browning, Brunning, Bruning, pronouncing ain't what he's doing. What he's doing is not losing, but infusing you with new things. And there's Dennis the Bennett, yeah. The man is a menace, yeah. Building a dynasty, some of the finest things. Promise you, you won't regret it. Sly as a fox, cultured in pop. Give him his props. Here is a thought, here is a box, and you cannot compare them at all. So don't even try. Careful with the news, but when you use a take, I take up Tony Fire. I mean Dyer, because anyone else is a huge mistake. Whoa, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, yeah. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Hey, fantasy round table, fantasy round table, woo. Fantasy round table. Come take a look at the crown, baby. Go.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Roundtable Podcast. We are talking Week 9, which is now in the books, and the NFL trade deadline, which saw a flurry of moves today. We will get to some of those trades as we get to the teams and their games. That begins with last Thursday's game, which we had suspected would not be great, and it was not that great. The Baltimore Ravens with a 28-6 win over the Miami Dolphins. We'll talk about the Dolphins in a minute, but for the Ravens, a second straight win gets them to 3-5. They're still chasing the Steelers. A second straight game with Charlie Kolar catching a touchdown. A lot of tight ends in Baltimore, but are you buying Charlie Kolar at all?
You know, my initial reaction was, yeah, he's definitely a stash. And then I realized he's like going into his fifth year or something. He's been around a little bit. He was good, pretty good coming out of Iowa State. And while Iowa's the tight end, Iowa State's just up the road. You know, they have both Andrews and Likely in the last year of their contract. So it's probable that only one of them comes back, you know. And so that means Kolar probably moves into that inline tight end role next year and allows either Likely or Andrews, whichever one returns, to maintain that pass catching role for the Ravens.
I have a real bad news for you. All three of them are free agents.
Oh, yeah?
Yep.
You know, I feel like I looked that up too and was surprised. Yeah, so I don't know. Well, Kolar will definitely be the cheapest one to re-sign.
I mean, it feels like it'd make more sense for them to bring back Kolar and Likely. Those guys were, I believe they were draft mates. And we thought at the time that they were going to kind of use them in a tandem. I can't remember who they had with Mark Andrews before, but it was his draft, Hayden Hurst, yeah. So, you know, maybe they'll keep them as draft mates, or God only knows what the Ravens are doing. Maybe they'll move on entirely and draft all new tight ends.
The offense isn't going to change. Probably the biggest potential change in that offense would be if Derrick Henry decides to hang it up. And I don't see that happening. So they'll still have Henry in his, you know, early down thumper role, grind it out role. Justice Hill will be their 4-minute back. Keaton Mitchell might cut into some of the 4-minute stuff. You know, they like him. But the wide receivers, you know, Hopkins and Flowers and Bateman, you know, they're all, I think, still under contract. Hopkins may be on a 1-year deal, but
yeah, I don't know. They'd miss him, but they had just re-upped Bateman, and Flowers should still be there too. So,
you know, and they could just slide Tez Walker into the DeAndre Hopkins role. You know, he's made very similar, not quite the dog Hopkins is. So they went out and got Draymond Green from the Titans, or Draymond Jones, excuse me, wrong sport. And I think that'll help boost their defense. Kyle Hamilton's one of the best defensive players in the league. Roquan Smith is outstanding. So they're setting themselves up, I think, to be able to kind of make a run at that AFC North title. And they're going to do it on the back of Lamar Jackson. So, if you roster Jackson in fantasy, giddy up.
Meanwhile, the Dolphins looked woeful the day after they fired GM Chris Greer, so they're going in a different direction, but said Mike McDaniel will remain the coach for the rest of the season. We thought that might open the door to some big moves. They did early on move Jalen Phillips, the pass rusher, to the Eagles. They didn't end up moving Waddle. They didn't do any other moves. So where do you think the Dolphins go from here?
I almost feel like McDaniel will survive. It's not easy to be an NFL coach, and you're going to have your ups and downs. And McDaniel, I think, is still pretty widely regarded as a good offensive mind. Chris Greer's taken the fall, I think, for signing Tua to the contract extension is sort of how I see it. They still have Jalen Waddle there. They still have Devon Achane. They need to do some rebuilding, and maybe they bring a GM in and say, look, see what you can do working with McDaniel, and the wink, wink, nod, nod. If it doesn't work after a year, we'll let you go get your own guy kind of approach. But it feels like there was a little bit of a disconnect between McDaniel and Greer when it came to team building. And so maybe McDaniel gets that worked out a little bit. If he can rally the team. No, I don't want to say they didn't play hard against the Ravens. They clearly weren't as good. And maybe some of it is, Tua outliving his usefulness as a quarterback. Maybe it's not having other parts around him via O-line or defense. But I think I would expect McDaniel to be able to get them playing okay. Do you think they're going to go to Zach Wilson or maybe even Quinn Ewers just to see what's there?
I don't know. I don't think so. I don't think it'll matter either. I think it's possible.
And that's why I think they may do it, because especially with Ewers, you want to see, is he feisty? Can he give you something?
But Ewers looked like he had moved up to number 2, and they actually inserted him for 2 of the week before it. But then on Thursday night's game, he was back to behind Wilson, and he was an inactive emergency quarterback. So I don't know what they're doing. I think it's possible McDaniel stays only because Miami's kind of screwed for next year. Tua's contract's not tradable, and it wouldn't really behoove you to release him. They're kind of sunk. I mean, if you released him, you just not have a playable player and also have a huge chunk of your cash. And I think it would actually escalate more on. It might make the Russell Wilson release look affordable. So they may just be kind of in purgatory and letting it go. I've thought they needed to get a real backup quarterback for a couple of years, and they've never really done it, except I would be curious to see what Zach Wilson, he looked better when he was with Denver, and he spent a whole year in that system learning things, and Peyton was always very complimentary, and they wanted to have him come back as their number 3, but he just had an opportunity to go elsewhere and have a better path to playing. So we'll see. But my biggest thing too, though, is at this point in time with Waller, that move, that whole gamble of trading Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith and then bringing back Darren Waller blew up in their face. Not getting anything for Tyreek Hill blew up in their face. And they have not drafted very well because the receivers that they have behind Jalen Waddle are not impressive. So I'm not sure you get a real great sense from any of the quarterbacks. And it's not like they have a great power running game to lean back on. So I don't know. I think the Dolphins are going to be bad for a while.
Well, and like I said, I think Chris Greer has taken the fall for that list of things you just put out there.
Well, and those would be GM moves, and they obviously wanted to get rid of him before the trade deadline, which it was interesting because it had seemed like that Greer had come out and said they would never move Waddle or Achan or any of these. And that getting rid of him made people think, oh, that means Miami's ownership is open to moving all these things. And, they probably could have gotten some good draft assets back for Jalen Waddle, and they didn't move him. So who knows? On to the Sunday games. The Broncos went to Houston, a back and forth, and came away with the 18-15 victory. After a 3-touchdown game in Week 8, Harvey led the Broncos with receptions, receiving yards, and had a huge receiving touchdown. Not necessarily what you expect from a running back, and he only had a couple of carries. Their running game left me cold. But are you starting to get more excited about Harvey as we hit the midpoint of the season?
So, I'm excited from the from the standpoint of he's the one that they expect to make the big plays. J.K. Dobbins is now the grinder. R.J. Harvey's the one catching the passes. He's the one they're looking to get in space and make explosive plays. He's only playing 29% of the snaps. And I think he's gonna. I think they view him as kind of that 1B, that electric change of pace back. And Sean Payton will always kind of try to keep somebody in that other role that's going to play a lot more snaps. Harvey's snaps have ticked up the last couple of weeks, I think you noted. But I don't know. I don't see him getting much past, 45% with any kind of regularity. And if they get up, obviously they're not going to run him. He's 195 pounder. So, they want him to make the big play. I think he ends up being the one you want for fantasy. Right now, I think he's RB22 and Dobbins is RB18, and they're kind of headed in opposite directions. Feels like Dobbins will probably end the season as a high-end RB3, and Harvey as a middling to maybe even high, if he keeps scoring touchdowns, maybe even a high-end RB2. So I like Harvey. I think they like him. They want to get him plenty of opportunity. I just think they don't believe he can hold up to a very heavy workload. So he feels like a 12 to 14 touch guy on a weekly basis, as opposed to, one of these 20 plus touchbacks.
Meanwhile, for the Texans, C.J. Stroud knocked out with a concussion. We have seen time and again those can be multi-week absences. Huge game with the Jaguars in Week 10. If he can't go, how do you feel about this Texans offense?
Davis Mills is a fairly steady backup. He's been with the team, I think 7 years now, 6 years, been there quite a while. He signed an multi-year extension with them. He kind of came out of nowhere and took the starting job his first couple of years. He stuck his neck out and went for it. 5th year?
Yeah.
Seems like a long time. So,
yeah.
But he did sign
in 2021.
He did sign an extension with him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, when he played and he was starting, he was basically QB 33, QB 34. He wasn't, and that's why they went somewhere else with the quarterback position. He's not an elevator. He isn't going to lift the team up around him. He isn't going to make mediocre players good. and that was sort of a lot of what they had around him. They had a couple decent guys. I think young Brandon Cooks was there, early career Nico Collins was there. And so Mills I expect more of the same. He's going to complete, 60-ish, 62% of his passes. He might have a Daniel Jones meltdown game, but he'll do okay. He's probably not going to be startable unless there's a significant amount of buys, and then he may very well be QB 24. But he could have a game where, when you've got weapons like Nico Collins and Christian Kirk and Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel, whichever it is, you can make some plays. Dalton Schultz, you've got some guys that can make some plays for you. And if they do, then he could surprise a little bit. They just don't have a great offensive line. He's going to be under pressure a lot. So
maybe not from the Jaguars.
Yeah, maybe not from the Jaguars, but I think that he'll be okay. Would I be surprised if he threw for 175 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception? That sounds reasonable.
One of the more entertaining games of the day, the Chicago Bears went to Cincinnati, got the 47-42 victory. No DeAndre Swift, so we got to see Kyle Monangai. He did not disappoint. 26 carries for 176 yards, 3 receptions for 22 yards. Do you think we'll see more of him even when Swift returns?
I think we'll see more. I don't think we're going to – it isn't all of a sudden going to turn into a 50-50 split, though. Swift was RB8 headed into – RB11 through week 8. So he was very productive. He's a good player. They like Monangai. I think they'll end up using him maybe – I think he's got a little more power than Swift does, and so – he could potentially vulture some touchdowns. But yeah, Monangai looked great, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's the guy next year starting for them. But I don't expect, it's not good. I don't think Swift is going to go the way of Chuba Hubbard.
Meanwhile, for the Bengals, Noah Fant.
Muted, or am I? All right, I'll re-enter.
The Bengals, another big week. It was 42 points for Joe Flacco and the offense after 38 points the week before, and he has lost both of those games, so he has to be frustrated. But in 2 of the last 3 weeks, we have seen Noah Fant get touchdowns at the tight end position, so that's been kind of interesting seeing his production there. That makes me think that he is a guy that I might be interested in keeping around, especially in a streaming position, especially because of that offense getting so much. So, Dennis, do you like Noah Fant as a streaming tight end option?
I want to, but he feels kind of touchdown dependent. He's tight end 23, tight end 27 on a point per game basis. The last couple of weeks, his targets have been up in the 4 or 5 range. I'd love to see it creep up even more, 5, 6, 7 target range. And he's only been, I think he only has 1 game early in the year over 40 yards. So if we could get him up to, 6 targets, 3 to 4 catches a game, and 50 yards on a weekly basis, and then throw in a touchdown every other week, then he becomes somebody you want to play. Right now, he feels a little bit more of a kind of a desperation play. You're putting him in hoping he gets the touchdown, not necessarily expecting it.
The Minnesota Vikings went to Detroit and got the 27-24 victory. Dennis, before he went out, J.J. McCarthy had been relatively unimpressive. He didn't have a spectacular game, but I thought he did pretty well against the Lions. 2 passing touchdowns, still only 14 of 25 and 143 yards, which isn't great, but did also run for a touchdown. So are you feeling a little better about J.J. McCarthy after he at least held his own in Detroit?
No. I mean, even a blind squirrel finds a nut once in a while. I don't, he barely under 60% completion rate, 14 to 25, only 143 yards. He's got some good weapons there with Hockenson and Jefferson and Addison. Aaron Jones had a nice game in his return. But it isn't like McCarthy ran a lot. He ran the ball 9 times, but he only gained 12 yards. So he popped the one into the end zone. I'm nervous. I'm not ready to start him even in Superflex. Minnesota only had 1 drive longer than 36 yards, whether it was scoring drives or not. They didn't really move the ball. Completed 56% of his passes. I should read my notes when I'm talking. And only 25 attempts. So much like when he was in college with Harbaugh, O'Connell kind of tried to hide him a little bit and didn't really throw the ball a ton. So I'm not sold on him.
Meanwhile, kind of a down day for the Lions. They had trouble running the ball. Is it just going to be kind of a up and down season, you think?
I think so. Detroit's defense suffered a lot of injuries last year, and they were up and down. You've got mercurial talent at wide receiver 2 and Jameson Williams, and David Montgomery. There's times he can be taken out of the game. Jahmyr Gibbs is great. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, but it's not uncommon to see Jared Goff struggle occasionally. So, his completion rate was decent. His rating was decent. 2 touchdowns. They just didn't quite get the running game going. 20 carries for 65 yards. So they weren't able to run the ball. Minnesota's defense gives up the 10th fewest passing yards, but the 6th most passing, or Detroit's defense gives up the 10th fewest passing yards, but the 6th most touchdowns. So it was kind of a game set up for J.J. McCarthy to maybe not throw for a lot of yards, but get a couple touchdown passes, which he did. So, Detroit, they only scored 24 points. That's significantly lower than their season average. We talked about it in other shows. Brian Flores is a pretty good defensive coordinator. So some games you just don't have it, and this happened to be one of them for Detroit.
The Chargers went into Tennessee to face the Titans. It was a closer game than it probably should have been, 27-20, thanks to an interception return for a touchdown and a punt return for a touchdown. But despite offensive line injuries and not much run support, Justin Herbert just keeps willing the Chargers to victory. He had 2 more passing touchdowns, led the team with 57 rush yards and a rushing touchdown. How good is Justin Herbert?
Justin Herbert is very good, like very, very, very good. Big, mobile, strong arm. He's everything we thought Trevor Lawrence would be. And it just, he's got great weapons with McConkey and Johnston, and Allen, Harris, Oronde Gadsden. It was a disappointing game from the running game. Herbert led the team with 57 yards. Jarrett Patterson outrushed Kamani Vidal after Vidal had a big game last week. So it should have been a game where the running game could produce a little more. They pulled out the win. I mean, the Chargers defense gave up 6 points. So It isn't while the score looks close, it really wasn't that close.
And that was kind of all in the first quarter. They had those two touchdowns. Justin Herbert had to have been on the sideline going, what the hell is going on here?
If I roster Justin Herbert, man, I'm excited. I'm rolling him out there every week. On one hand, it
And
feels
he
like
has to be kind of a steal in redraft because after how we saw them play last year, where they really kind of didn't have a passing offense, it seemed like, oh man, they invested heavily in the backfield. They're going to try to run even more. But even before those running backs got hurt, they came out slinging the ball. It was a total misdirect. So a lot of people were worried when, even when we were doing rankings like Herbert, is he going to be 15, 16? I mean, he was QB3 going into the week. I can't see him moving much.
no, yeah, he was and I was guilty of they're gonna, especially when they signed Harris and then drafted Hampton. It's like, oh, they're just gonna run the ball all day, every day. Be a waste of Herbert's talent.
Now he's QB2 on the
Yeah.
season. It just doesn't seem like the Titans do anything well.
They don't.
Fortunately, we are not going to have to see them in Week 10. That's probably the best Titans.
And they traded away Draymond Jones. They're one of their better defensive linemen. They're in rebuild, and that right now it's if I'm Brian Callahan?
Well, he's gone. Brian Callahan's gone.
Oh, that's right. McCoy is there. They canned him. If I'm McCoy, I'm like, look, let me see what kind of growth I can get out of Ward and this young receiving core, and go from there. I'd hate to think that he plays himself into getting signed as the head coach, because I just don't think he's the answer. But you want to see those young guys grow.
An entertaining game. The Falcons went to New England, ended up being very close, 24-23. The Patriots beat the Falcons because the kicker missed an extra point. Just a brutal loss for Atlanta. I want to ask you, though, about New England. Now 7-2. They've won 6 straight games. Drake May, QB3 on the season for fantasy, but he's doing that because he has looked pretty good, despite kind of a shifting and changing offense around him and not much of a running game. Should he be in the MVP discussion?
Yeah, I think you can have, he's maybe a little above the others receiving votes category, but he's got, like, I think he's second or third in completion percentage in the league. No receiver has really stepped up and played elite for them. Hunter Henry has his days. Diggs has his. Booty has his. Pop Douglas will have his. Ramondre Stevenson had started to settle into being like the one consistent thing. And no, I don't mean he's consistently going to fumble every game. But then he got banged up. Henderson, he did okay, 14 for 55. Caught 4 passes for 32 yards, but he didn't get in the end zone. I feel like he's priming himself to maybe be the MVP next year. They're playing well, and if he wins this division or finishes second, they get into the playoffs. Even if they go one and done, it's Vrabel's first year. They're building. Let's see what Kyle Williams can do. Can he continue to grow, build some offensive line, and kind of keep moving in the right direction, and see if Drake May can, explode next year.
The San Francisco 49ers went to New York and got the 34-24 victory over the Giants. Dennis, Brian Robinson Jr. got only 5 carries, but turned it into 53 yards and a touchdown. We've worried about Christian McCaffrey's health long-term. He already has 168 carries and 61 receptions, which puts him on pace for 432 touches this season. Do you think as we go into the back half, we might see them moderate his workload and bring Brian Robinson in more?
I think they're going to play Robinson a little bit as a change of pace. They're going to, if they get leads, they're going to give Robinson maybe a little more run. And I could see him doing it early. So let's say they get up by 10 points in the first half. Maybe they give Robinson a whole series instead of just a play. And if they're not putting a team away, it ends up being a situation where they're just. I don't think that it's going to significantly impact Christian McCaffrey. I mean, he's the best player on the team, maybe potentially the best
maybe
player.
The healthiest player.
Right. That being said, Brian Robinson is probably the best handcuff in the league right now.
Yeah. Meanwhile, for the Giants, another tough loss for them. But I want to talk to you a little bit. We're, at the midway point in the season. It's time to start thinking about award winners. And when it comes to Rookie of the Year for offense, there have been a lot of hit or miss performances from guys. What do you think about Jackson Dart? He has 10 passing touchdowns, only 3 interceptions in his 6 starts, 251 rushing yards, and 5 touchdowns. He's probably not blowing anyone away. It doesn't feel exactly like last year's Rookie of the Year campaign, but do you think he's the leader right now at the halfway point?
I would probably lean towards Emeka Egbuka just because the team is better. And so it gives, when your team is doing great, like if Dart can get the Giants close to 500, then I think that's a big boost because, you lose Malik Neighbors, you lose Cam Skattebo.
34, 562, and 5 touchdowns for Egbuka so far. It's not bad, but that's the thing. Some of these rookies have had some moments, but I wouldn't say anything's blowing away.
Yeah, I mean, so Cam Ward and Ashton Genty are clearly underperforming. Marion Hampton and Cam Skattebo are injured. Ted McMillan.
Skattebo, I think, could have made it if he hadn't gotten killed there. It would have been fun to see him toward the end, but you're right. Like the big running back class, like RJ Harvey and all of them too. It just still better than Caleb Johnson. I
mean, potentially Quinshon Judkins could make a run. He's got the job to himself. If he can, the Browns are going to be bad, but if he can put up some numbers, it feels like it'll come down to Egbuka, McMillan, or Dart is kind of where it feels that, like if it was like the Heisman Trophy and you're inviting 3 to New York, those are the 3.
Tyler Warren would have been the one that I feel like's in second because he's been pretty dominant as tight end, and his team is actually doing well too.
I knew I was forgetting somebody.
I know I forgot about Egbuka when I was thinking about them because I was trying to think. There haven't been any like huge receiver kind of things either. It's just a weird year. A lot of rookies contributing. I'll be curious to see how it ends down the stretch. One of the marquee matchups from Sunday, the Pittsburgh Steelers hosted the Indianapolis Colts and got a 27-20 victory. Rough day for Daniel Jones. Colts still 7-2. They were a big player on the trade market today. Traded for Sauce Gardner from the Jets. Did trade away a couple of firsts and A.D. Mitchell. What do you think of that trade for the Colts?
I love the trade. Sauce Gardner is not playing, I think, as well this year as he did last year, or maybe even a couple years ago. He's still a very, very good cornerback. He's a guy they can put out there by himself in man-to-man coverage, and he's gonna get the job done. We've talked a lot about Daniel Jones and bad Daniel Jones, and sort of knew that with as much certainty as you can really know anything, that he'd have a game like this. And having it against Pittsburgh, a team whose defense can be very opportunistic and get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, it seemed like it was tailor-made. Unfortunately, it wasn't Jonathan tailor-made.
Yeah.
But no, I like the trade. I expect that Jones is going to bounce back just fine. I think A.D. Mitchell getting a new, I don't know, it's tough to call this New York situation a new lease on life, But after he dropped that ball going into the end zone and then committed the penalty, Shane Steichen doghoused him pretty hard.
Well, plus Alec Pierce has been pretty good for them with Pierce, Pittman, Downs. They have three pretty good receivers plus Warren and Taylor. I think he was superfluous. And the Jets,
He was.
meanwhile,
And Alec Pierce leads the league in yards per catch at like
Yeah.
20.7 yards per catch or something.
Meanwhile, Pittsburgh, they had Baltimore kind of breathing down their neck. They had a bad home loss to the Packers the week before. Really turned up big here. 6 turnovers on defense, get the win. How important was this win for the Steelers?
I think all wins are important. And now Baltimore is revved up and starting to chase. They didn't have a good running game against Indianapolis. And Aaron only threw the ball for 203 yards. It was very much one of those games where the 6 turnovers were definitely playing into the ability for the Steelers to win this game. If the turnover battle was fairly even, it feels like the Colts might have won by 10. Or even if they only had 2 turnovers instead of 6, maybe they win by 7 or 10 points. But because they were having the issues, Jonathan Taylor only had 14 carries. What was it? The plays weren't Indianapolis had more plays than Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh had short fields. So,
yeah. Probably the most surprising game of the day, the Carolina Panthers went to Green Bay. Green Bay was 13.5 point favorites and lost 16-13. Rico Dowdle.
Uniforms.
Yeah, those uniforms were terrible. Rico Dowdle, 25 carries, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 receptions, only 5 carries for Chuba Hubbard. Is this Dowdle's backfield now?
Yes. He provided the explosiveness even when they were early in the season when Hubbard was still getting his fair share. And don't get me wrong, I think Hubbard, based on his performance last year, had earned the opportunity. And early in the season, he just didn't seem to have the explosion, didn't seem to provide any spark. He was almost Najee Harris-like is probably the best way I could put it. But I think moving forward, it's, thank you for your service, Chuba Hubbard. He's now the change of pace back. He's going to get some snaps here and there. He may end up, vulturing a touchdown here or there. But I think they're pretty comfortable if something happens to Dowdle to go back to Hubbard. They've got the Panthers have depth at the running back position, but Rico Dowdle has looked really, really good.
Meanwhile, for the Packers, Tucker Kraft tore his ACL and is out for the year. He was not only one of the best tight ends in football, he was probably their best and most explosive pass catcher. What does this do for the Packers?
You never want to lose a guy that's playing that well. But when they drafted him, they also drafted Luke Musgrave. They drafted Musgrave higher, and there was some expectation it would take Kraft some time to ramp up because he was coming off college injury. And Musgrave played serviceably. He was tight end 22 when Kraft was out that first year. Athletically, they're very favorably comped. Kraft is had a 9.71 relative athletic score. Musgrave had a 9.82. Kraft has a little bit more Musgrave had just slightly more straight line speed. It was like I think like a 4.65 to a 4.6. It was real close. But Kraft was more agile. His agility scores were better. So I don't think they have to really change what they're doing at the tight end position, but they got Christian Watson back. They're going to ride Josh Jacobs and Emmanuel Wilson in the backfield. Romeo Doubs is having a good year. I don't think that Musgrave produces at the level that Kraft was. I think but I think he can be 75, 80% of Musgrave, no, with no issues at all.
On to the afternoon games. Probably not a lot of people saw this one, but Jacksonville Jaguars get the 30-29 victory over the Raiders in overtime after the Raiders' 2-point conversion fell short. These teams engaged in a trade post game today. The Raiders sent Jacoby Myers, their wide receiver, to the Jaguars. Let's talk about it from the Jaguars side first. Obviously Travis Hunter injured his knee on Friday, got put on IR. They're saying it's not season ending, but he's out obviously for a few games. They're kind of beat up all over the offense. Brian Thomas Jr. rolled an ankle. How does Myers help the Jaguars?
It definitely provides them with some depth. De'Ami Brown and Parker Washington are really their other two guys there. Austin Trammell was the third guy. Some T. Jones, I forget his name. Tim Jones, maybe.
They also have Tim Patrick.
But I think he's been injured. He's been out. So getting with Myers, he'll be able to slide into, the wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 role. But really, Brian Thomas is the one that's got to step up and start to make stuff happen with Travis Hunter going out. Parker Washington stepped up and went 8 for 9 for 90 yards this week. Didn't get in the end zone, but seemed like he was like, well, if you guys aren't going to eat this, I'm going to eat it kind of approach. I don't think Parker Washington is an exceptional athlete. He isn't going to beat you with size. He isn't going to beat you with pure speed. He's just out there. He's a grinder, kind of in that Brian Hartline mode as far as wide receivers go. He's just going to go out there and work his butt off. Adam Thielen's another great example of that. So I think Parker Washington will slide right into that role. And if Thomas struggles getting, depending on, is it a low ankle sprain, high ankle sprain?
High ankle sprain.
So he could struggle, and he has not developed any real chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. So it was interesting to see that when Hunter went out, who seemed to have developed chemistry, I guess, Thomas needs to do a commercial with him. But Parker Washington stepped right in and was putting up some numbers. So I think if I'm Jacksonville, what's their record there? 5-3.
5-3, yeah.
They wanted to improve their depth. They wanted to make sure they have weapons. And Jacoby Myers gives them another weapon. If not a tier 1 weapon, he's a low tier 2, tier 3 guy that you can roll out there every play, and he's gonna give you a good effort and catch a few balls.
What do you think the Raiders do to replace him?
Maybe they use Michael Mayer a little more. Maybe Dante Thornton gets a chance to step up. They just signed Tyler Lockett. So
that's who they were trying to go to on that 2-pointer that got bounced. Maybe Geno needs his security blanket back.
Something. They just, unfortunately, the Raiders aren't.
They said Lockett asked for his release from Tennessee so he could go somewhere where he could be, play like meaningful football, and then he signs with the Raiders.
Sometimes it's who you're playing with is what makes it meaningful. And he's got Pete and Geno.
The other crappy afternoon game, the Saints went to battle the Rams. The Rams got a cakewalk 34-10 victory. Tyler Shough making his first start, 15-24, 176 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. They could not run the ball, only 14 yards on 6 carries for Kamara, 11 yards on 3 carries from Neal. So that probably wasn't great. But how did you feel about Tyler Shough's start?
He's just a tall Spencer Rattler with a lower completion rate.
I was going to say he may have less upside than Rattler, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, it's honestly, I think Shook can make most of the throws pretty well. I just don't think he differentiates himself from Rattler in any meaningful way. To me, it feels like it's a situation where Kellen Moore said, "Hey, I'm going to play this guy because that's who I drafted. I didn't draft the other guy." And they're essentially the same as far as production level. I think Rattler's got a little better, he's slightly better completion percentage. I think if he hadn't played, it felt like he played timid, maybe played not to make mistakes, and that kind of came back and bit him in the butt a little bit, and because they weren't real productive in getting the ball in the end zone. But also Kamara wasn't playing well. Their O-line was struggling. They had injuries. So there were a lot of factors that went into it. Ultimately, Fernando Mendoza is the starting quarterback for this team in 2026.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to get any better for Shook. They traded Rashid Shaheed away, so that's just one less receiver on, and not.
And they traded offensive lineman Trevor Penning, who was, I think
he wasn't. Yeah, but he wasn't
ago.
starting. I think what they said, Fuisi was starting, and Kelvin Banks may not make that big of a deal.
Yeah,
the Rams, meanwhile, 6-2. Do you like them as a contender?
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking with a guy at work. We'll talk sports, as coworkers will often do. And he kind of asked the same question. And so my thought was, look, I don't know if the Rams are that team. Don't get me wrong. I like Puka. I like Stafford. I like Williams, Devontae Adams, Higbee. Their defense has done a good job replacing Aaron Donald. I mean, they're not at that level, but they're playing very well. I don't know if I believe in the Rams as like a Super Bowl contender, but I believe in Sean McVay as a Super Bowl coach.
Yeah.
And to me, this team has enough parts that I could see McVay getting them back to the Super Bowl. Stafford's QB 8. Puka, Adams, Williams are all very productive. The defense has given up the second fewest points. They're top 11 versus both the pass and the run. So while they scored 34 points against the Saints, their defense is good enough. They can win 20-14 games. They don't need to always score 30, 35 points to win. And so far, they've stayed pretty healthy. And we see it year after year. The Super Bowl winner is often the team that stays the healthiest.
Probably the best game of the late window was the Kansas City Chiefs at the Buffalo Bills, and ended up being a pretty competitive one. The Bills get the 28-21 victory. Chiefs now heading into a bye week. They fall to 5-4. Patrick Mahomes, a career low completion percentage, below 50%. How are you feeling about the Chiefs?
So I love what's going on with Rashee Rice being back. Xavier Worthy's the one. Him and Hollywood Brown both kind of took a hit with Rice coming back. Rice is getting a lot of volume, though. Him and Worthy both had 7 targets to lead the team this week. They just don't have a running game, man. I don't think I was one who felt like they were gonna trade for Breece Hall this season here at the trade deadline. Hunt put up 11 for 49 for a touchdown, those are good numbers, but they don't have somebody they can give the ball to 20 times and go get them 120 yards or 110 yards and 2 touchdowns if they need that. And I think that ultimately ends up being their downfall. Maybe Pacheco gets back and he can stay healthy. It doesn't feel like they trust anybody but Hunt. So I don't know. They need a running game. Their defense is pretty good, so they could potentially win some high-scoring games because they do have weapons. So,
Meanwhile, Buffalo goes to 6-2. Josh Allen now 5-1 regular season against Patrick Mahomes. They're still second place in their own division. They said this is the first time the Bills and Chiefs have met with Mahomes and Allen, where neither team was in first place in their division, which I thought was interesting. But how are we the Bills?
Man, James Cook is having a phenomenal year. It feels to me like in Dynasty, you're going to want to sell. If Cook doesn't get injured this year, you're going to want to sell him after this year. Maybe it'll be a year early, but again, he's a 199-pound running back that's taken on a lot of volume. Khalil Shakir and Dalton Kincaid are the top two receiving weapons on the Bills. This was a game where Allen only threw the ball 26 times, but he had a lot of completions, 23, big yardage, 273, but he ended up vulturing 2 touchdowns. So, it's like in the pass game, it's almost like Josh Allen's the one you want. Everybody else is a tier 2 or tier 3 asset in that passing game because they get the ball down and then Josh Allen runs it in.
Sunday Night Football, we thought it would be dreadful. It was probably worse than we imagined. Seahawks get the 38-14 victory. They were up 31-7 at the half, so this one pretty much a laugher. They made a trade today, acquired Rashid Shaheed, who actually played with Clint Kubiak last year when he was offensive coordinator in New Orleans. What does he add to Seattle's offense?
He adds an explosiveness that, well, JSN has some explosive ability. He doesn't have the pure speed that Rashid Shaheed does. Torrey Horton, I think that's who their young guy was.
Yep.
was providing some of that. It makes their offense. It should be good for their running game because it makes their offense very explosive as far as getting down the field. It'll loosen up the line, so maybe Walker and Charbonnet can get some stuff done, get their yards per carry up over that 4-yard mark, maybe get some explosive runs as well. I love the addition of Shaheed. AJ Barner and Elijah Arroyo are both playing well at the tight end position. It does kind of look like the end of the road for Cooper Kupp. Yeah. What did he do?
He was out with injury
this week. So it kind of feels like he's becoming very much a fringe player at this point in his career, struggles staying healthy. So
I'll be honest though, the way this offense is, I'm almost feeling like you're playing JSN and you're playing Darnold and you feel pretty good about it. And the entire rest of them, Kupp, Shaheed, Horton, AJ Barner, Elijah Arroyo, Ken Walker, Zach Charbonnet are YOLO picks in your lineup.
I can't disagree with that statement.
Meanwhile, for the Commanders, Jaden Daniels got left in at garbage time, dislocated his non-throwing elbow. They are going to have to do some work. It may not be season-ending. They haven't said for sure, but it's hard to imagine him coming back. They're now 3-6. Is the run kind of over for the Commanders in 2025?
Man, that was I go out of my way to avoid seeing that stuff. But you couldn't miss it. That elbow bent the other way. The fact nothing tore to the extent of, all right, we're going to have to completely reattach everything from the elbow down. That was just brutal. But that being said, Marcus Mariota could put on his Nick Foles super backup pants and make a run, but they just have had so many injuries. McLaurin missing time, Debo missing a game, Eckler out, now Daniels, Noah Brown's missed a lot of time. The offensive line has had a couple people out here and there. It just feels like this ain't their year.
Yeah. Well, they also lost Luke McCaffrey and Marshawn Lattimore for the year in that game. Yeah. McLaurin not going to be available this week. They have no running game to fall back on. It's grim tidings for the Commanders. Monday Night Football, also a grim game. The Arizona Cardinals went into Dallas and got the 27-17 victory. You know, I was asking before if you thought they should stick with Jacoby Brissett. They've already come out and said he will start in week 10, but their coach also said it's because Murray is not ready to come back from injury for now. But I think this team looks better with Brissett. He's not that much older than Kyler Murray at this point in time. Do you think they should stick with Brissett?
Yeah, you know, the what was it? It was about 9 hours ago when Gannon came out and said Kyler Murray's our starter when healthy. And then I'm trying to find it. It feels like they came back out here shortly ago and said, let's see, Brissett's going to be the starter going forward. Now, that being said, if you know,
from what I saw, they didn't say he was the starter going forward. They said he was the starter against Seattle.
So let's see.
Cardinals to start Brissett, not Murray against Seahawks. He will make his 4th straight start. The decision means Murray will remain sidelined. Gannon said that nothing had changed in terms of his starting quarterback, meaning Brissett would back up Murray once fully healed. He said he likes how the offense is going. He said he'll take all the variables. I like what they're doing right now.
So, you know, it's what Darren Urban said, that Murray's foot is quote unquote still a factor. But it had begun to feel inevitable. Now, Monty Ossenfort didn't draft Kyler Murray. That was Steve Keim. And don't get me wrong, I don't think Jacoby Brissett's the long-term answer either. Brissett, when he's had chances to start, so 2 seasons in Indianapolis in 2017 and 2019, he made 30 starts, threw for just over 6,000 yards, had a 31-13 touchdown to interception ratio, but only completed about 60% of his passes. It feels like they're building towards Gannon and Ossenfort getting a chance to pick their own quarterback. Mm-hmm. And, you know, well, you'll have to look at I feel like even with the recent contract extension, there's going to be, you know, those coaches are egomaniacal, and there's going to be a coach out there that says, look, I can make Kyler Murray work. And, you know, he's good.
There are worse options out there.
He'd
be the best quarterback in Tennessee. He'd be the best quarterback in New Orleans. I bet if we went down, he'd possibly be the best quarterback in Minnesota too.
Yeah,
they're only 1-2 with Brissett, so it's not like they were lighting the world on fire. And they're at Seattle and then home for the 49ers the next 2 weeks. Even if he starts both those games, and they said originally the injury could take as many as 8 weeks to heal for Kyler Murray, which would have put him back around November 30th. So, you know, it's one of those, though, like we felt about JJ McCarthy. Is he really still hurt, or are they just not ready to put him back in there? You know, and it feels like they're
Marvin Harrison shares are perfectly happy right now with Brissett.
Meanwhile, so Dallas loses another what should have been like a teed up winnable game. I still think they're 3-5-1, but they made a trade this morning to acquire a linebacker from the Bengals. Make it make sense.
And then they followed it up by acquiring a defensive tackle. So,
oh yeah, that's right. Because then they went and got Quinnen Williams.
Yep, they gave up Mazi Smith, who they were out on. They were like, we missed on this guy. They gave up a 26 second and a 27 first for Quinnen Williams. So you know,
a lot of
Wilson had played him
out the door.
Wilson was playing so well that he got benched in Cincinnati. Maybe he's a better scheme fit for Dallas. Who knows? I do like Dallas's potential with Kenny Clark and Quinnen Williams at the defensive tackle positions. Some stuff could happen there. That could improve their defense by taking a little pressure off their cornerbacks, by getting some pressure on the quarterbacks. But Dallas, they have to outscore people. That's just where they're at. And if they can't outscore people, then it's not good. They're not going to win games. Javonte Williams, man, watching him last night, I was like, man, this dude's having such a good game. And it wasn't. It was 9.3 points. He didn't get in the end zone, and he had a fumble. So I think he actually ended up with 7.3 points. And
I mean, he was having a good game, but they abandoned the running game entirely in the second half because they were too gone.
Yeah.
I like how we talked about the Jets. They now have 3 first-round picks in 2027. They'll be the first team to have 3 first-round picks in the same draft since the 2022 Jets. I was actually looking at this list of the last 3 teams to have 3 picks in the first round. The 2022 Jets, who got Gardner, Garrett Wilson, and Jermaine Johnson, and that has not really led to a lot for them. The 2020 Dolphins, which I'm pretty sure that was the year they drafted Tua and Waddle, and must have been somebody else. It hasn't really panned out for them. The 2019 Raiders, I'm pretty sure those 3 draft picks got their GM at the time, who's Mike Mayock fired, and the 2019 Giants, and I'm pretty sure that led to a house cleaning there. So maybe you don't want 3 picks in the first round.
Yeah, the Jets, they've spent first round picks the last 2 years on tap. Theoretically, they have Elijah Vera Tucker was out this year, so they're who's been considered basically their best offensive lineman. So they have I like the potential for the Jets. I don't know if they've got the right people in place to make things happen, but they kept Garrett Wilson. They added Mitchell, who should be good. Mason Taylor has been really good. I don't know. They didn't trade Breece Hall, so does this mean they're going to re-sign Breece?
His contract expires, so who knows? Well, I guess we'll learn more. The Jets play the Browns this week, so that ought to be a fun game, which we will talk about when we do our preview. We will not be back until Saturday morning, back a little later this week. So that is past Thursday, which means the first game of the week will have occurred. So before we get out of here, 2-6 Las Vegas Raiders at the 7-2 Denver Broncos. What are you expecting in this game?
Well, the Raiders give up the 10th most points, and they give up the 3rd most turnovers. And Denver's defense gets the most sacks with 4. They lead the league in sacks with 40. It feels like Denver is just going to roll. And while I hope I'm not jinxing you, the Denver's defense is very good. It feels like, they're going to be able to do their thing. I'd like this, Brock Bowers, he'll deliver by hook or by crook. That's really the only guy I feel good starting in for the Raiders. But even then, it isn't like Denver can't focus on him, because the Raiders don't have a whole hell of a lot of others, so.
Yeah, these are if you're 7-2 and have won 6 in a row and are undefeated at home and fancy yourself a good team, these are the games that you should win, and you should win handily. And they did that when they played the Cowboys at home a couple weeks ago and kind of blasted them out, even though the Cowboys had a pretty good offense going in. They were able to take them out and shut them down. So hopefully Denver should be fairly healthy. Surtain won't play, but Mims has a chance of coming back. They're banged up in a couple of places, but it should be a good game. For Denver, I am taking the Broncos, and I am taking them to not give me a blood pressure check this game either. So let's feel hopeful.
Well, I'm pulling for you, dog.
Yeah. Well, we'll recap that action when we're back on Saturday. We'll talk about all of the other games that are coming up. But until then, I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Enjoy Thursday night football and enjoy all the madness. We will see you on Saturday.